and instead going into this fasting pathway where we're able to focus on repair and rejuvenation and cleanup. And so that's essentially what fasting mimicking is. It really taps into this ability to get food while our body believes that we're in a fasted state. So in short, fasting mimicking is fasting with food.
Welcome to Suburban Warrior, the podcast that will impact, inspire, and empower you to transform your mindset and become the badass warrior that you are. I'm your host and fellow warrior, Chrissy Pfeiffer, former clinician and corporate marketing exec turned multi-passionate entrepreneur, performance and life coach, and mom to 4 not-so-little warriors. Each week, I will bring you honest conversations with inspiring guests to share their stories of resilience, optimism, success, and simple yet effective strategies so that you transform your thoughts and change your behavior to get the results you want in your life. You will be empowered to take action, warrior up, and believe in you. Let's do this. What's up, warriors? Welcome back to another episode of the Suburban Warrior Podcast. I'm your host, Chrissy Pfeiffer, and back this week with another amazing suburban warrior here to share her expertise with us. And I am especially excited about the topic of this week's episode because I know that we've all heard about fasting at this point, right? And there's so much information out there, and it's a little overwhelming and hard to really distill down, like, what is fasting? Why should I be doing it? What type of fasting? There's intermittent fasting. There's a water fast. Should I be fasting like a 24-hour fast once a week? Like, there's all these different types that really we need to know what is the best for us. And in recent studies, fasting has been shown to support not only weight management, but also cellular regeneration and biological age. And for midlife women facing unique challenges with metabolism and aging, intermittent and periodic fasting can offer really a sustainable approach, providing a more effective, safer, and easier solution other than dietary changes. So today, we're going to discuss fasting mimicking diet, especially in perimenopause and postmenopause, and why it's an especially beneficial option for women over 40, and then simple ways that we can integrate fasting benefits into a regular lifestyle. So with that being said, let me introduce my guest today, Renee Fitton. She is a leader in the intersection of nutrition, healthcare, and education. As Director of Education and Healthcare Services at Prolon, she shapes sales strategies and equips healthcare practitioners with cutting-edge insights into nutrition and longevity. Her expertise in evidence-based practices and nutritional science has made her a trusted authority. Renee specializes in applying advanced nutritional research to help people achieve longer, healthier lives, especially through approaches that benefit cellular health without requiring drastic lifestyle changes. Welcome to the podcast, Renee.
Thank you so much for having me, Chrissy. I am excited to sink our teeth into this topic. I know it's one that a lot of people have been hearing about, especially lately. And there's all sorts of information out there, and it's important to really distill this to the right info that's especially right for this audience. And I love that we're really personalizing it today to that perimenopause and postmenopausal space.
Yes, absolutely. Because like I said, I think there is a lot of noise out there about fasting. And I know for me, I am 50. I started perimenopause at 43, like a lightning bolt, struck by a lightning bolt. And one of the first things I implemented was intermittent fasting for me because it was what I had heard about. A friend of mine, Dr. Mary Claire Haver, this is back before everyone knew who she was, but she had just created the Galveston diet, and part of that was intermittent fasting. So I really learned that from her, and I tried it, and I found that it was a strategy for me that was easy to incorporate into my lifestyle, and it really helped with so many benefits of just feeling better with a lot of my menopausal symptoms. So I'm really excited, though, today to hear about a fasting mimicking diet, because since then there has been so much information, really not just about like weight loss, which I think it's huge for it, but really about longevity and
That
anti-aging and how it helps us at the cellular level. So before we get into all that fun science and all these amazing benefits, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Absolutely. So, as you mentioned, my name is Renee. I am a registered dietitian, but I actually go by longevity dietitian. And that's because my master's degree is actually in health span and longevity nutrition. So, really hyper focusing on not just how can we live our longest, but how can we live our healthiest longest. And this program is actually based out of USC and was founded by Dr. Walter Longo, who's one of the leading longevity researchers today, and who's actually the founder of the fasting mimicking diet and has done about 30 years of research now on fasting, longevity, healthy aging, and has since come to find the fasting mimicking diet. So that's partially why I am so passionate about this program and this method of fasting and just the whole concept of leveraging nutrition to help us age healthfully.
Yeah. I am very passionate about that as well.
We
Leveraging
all should
nutrition.
be, right?
Yeah, we really are. Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's just dive right into it. Tell us exactly, because we all know what a fast is, right? It's not eating. Most people have heard of intermittent fasting and sort of like the different cycles of intermittent fasting. We can talk about that briefly, but tell me like exactly what is a fasting mimicking diet?
Yeah, well, I love that you started this off by saying we all know what fasting is. It's not
Yeah.
eating. And realistically, that is based off of kind of like a black and white dictionary definition of fasting. And it makes sense, right? Because it's easy to see, did you put food in your mouth or did you not put food in your mouth? But it turns out that at the cellular level, our cells aren't reading that same dictionary. They have a different definition of what needs to happen in your body for you to be considered to be in a fasted state. And so I like to think of it like as if our cells have alarm bells on their surface and essentially radars looking out for nutrients and food. And it turns out that they are looking for a specific amount of that specific type of nutrient. And only when the specific nutrients are in specific amounts do those alarm bells sound off. And do they say, whoa, food is here. And now it's time to focus on all of this growth that we can do now that food is present. And so the 30 years of research behind fasting mimicking went to figure out what are those foods that our body can have and that our cells can see without triggering, hey, we got to grow. And instead, going into this fasting pathway where we're able to focus on repair and rejuvenation and cleanup. And so that's essentially what fasting mimicking is. It really taps into this ability to get food while our body believes that we're in a fasted state. So, in short, fasting mimicking is fasting with food.
Wow. Okay, that's amazing. And tell us about like, do fasting mimicking diets, like, do they support women, as they navigate like these unique metabolic changes, like especially for women in midlife? How do they support us?
This is honestly a big question because there's a lot of ways. And
Okay.
let me just step back by saying when we work at a cellular level, when we're making changes at a cellular level, we're able to have a pretty, whole body, holistic approach, right? Because
Yeah.
our cells make up our entire body. So if we're working at that level, we're really working at the root cause. So the impacts are very systemic. Now, some of the things that I like to focus on, especially for my patients who are in perimenopause or postmenopausal, are the healthy aging benefits. And when I say healthy aging, I'm talking specifically about biological age. And
Yeah.
so this is the age that your body behaves, that your cells behave. So it turns out that our biological age can be younger and unfortunately also older than our chronological age. And so we certainly want to do everything we can to get that number, that biological age number, as low as we can. And then our body actually behaves younger than our true age. So who the heck cares what number is on your driver's license if your biological age is drastically younger? Now, there's been some really cool research that was just done last year measuring biological age before and after someone did 3 cycles of the fasting mimicking diet. And just 3 cycles, this is, by the way, I don't think I mentioned, but the fasting mimicking diet is only 5 days.
Okay.
So 5 days a month, that's it. Done over
Okay.
a three
That was
month
my next question. How often?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
Things would change if I told you had to do this every single day, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But no, this is only 5 days a month. So 5 days
Okay.
a month for 3 months. And that's it, because this is the intro period, because
Oh,
realistically, the long term is only doing it 3 times a year. That's
okay.
it. So 15 days a year. But let's just start with this intro where you're doing it once a month for 3 months. And that got a 2.5 year biological age reversal.
Wow.
That is incredible. In the world of healthy aging, in the world of longevity, to get 2.5 years back with just 15 days of intervention is unheard of. It is
Yeah.
really impressive stuff. And when we think about perimenopause, that is a symptom of aging.
Yeah.
And so if we do everything that we can to, at that cellular level, support reversing biological age, we will also be essentially supporting this period of perimenopause as well. And so that's just one. I'll quickly touch on a couple more, and you can tell me which ones you want me to double down on.
Yeah. Great. Okay.
So another area that I hear about all the time, of course, is weight loss. And one of the things that we like to notice with weight loss and fasting mimicking is that it's the right kind of weight loss. So we're seeing it especially targeted in dangerous fat areas, especially in the belly fat region, but also we're seeing it highly protective of muscle. And we should absolutely double down and talk about muscle and its importance as we age, and especially for women as we age, because
Yeah.
muscle loss is also one of the major causes for some of that perimenopausal and postmenopausal weight gain.
Yeah.
And so the fact that the fasting mimicking diet can protect there is so important. Just a fun one that I like to mention is our skin health. Skin completely made up of cells, of course. And when we get just even 5 days of the fasting mimicking diet, we've been able to show improvement in skin hydration, improvement in fine lines, improvement in skin texture. So again, just this outward view of what's happening on the inside. I tell people to take a picture of their face before they start and on the last day of their fast after they've completed. And you would be shocked at the difference that those 5 days can make, even just to the skin. And then I'll kind of finish off with autophagy, which is this deep cellular cleanup, which we should
Yeah.
absolutely double down
Yeah.
on. And
Absolutely.
then energy, mental clarity, and even better relationships with food and increased confidence. I mean, you wouldn't believe, like, I could keep going, but those are going to be my top ones so far.
Yeah. It really is amazing. All of because it's a whole body benefit. So let's talk about the autophagy first, because let's really understand what is happening at the cellular level and why is autophagy even important?
Yeah, great
Yeah.
question. So let's take a full step back to autophagy. What the heck is this word?
Yes,
Some people
exactly.
may know what the heck we're talking about, and other people,
Yes.
this could be the first time you're hearing about it. And it certainly sounds like a mouthful, but it is essentially, what I like to think about it is a process that our body has evolved to have to clean up. And it's a cleanup at the cellular level. So I like to think of it like a vacuum cleaner for inside of our cells, or even an internal doctor for inside of our cells. And why is that important? Well, I mean, it sounds important. It sounds like we should probably have a clean cells and we should have a doctor inside there fixing things up. But what's especially important is that as we age, our cells just naturally, the things inside the cells, all of the components inside the cells, the organelles, the proteins, etc., that help it run, start to get worn out, start not to work as well. I like to think of it kind of like a car that you are driving every single day. It's not going to live forever. There's going to be, I'm not an expert at cars, but let's say the spark plugs go out. I don't know.
Right.
I hear those things go
Yeah.
awry. But all sorts of little things can go wrong, and things can need to be replaced and be swapped out. And the car can still absolutely run as long as you switch out things and you maintain it and you repair it and you do this
Yeah.
periodic cleanup. And so it's important for us to have essentially those pit stops for our body, for our cells, where we're doing this cleanup. And again, we only need to do that, kind of like spring cleaning style a few times a
Yeah.
year, right? Because it's just about getting rid of the junk that has accumulated over this last period of time, getting rid of that and letting your body do the work to repair and refill with newer, healthier cellular components so that we can be off to the races and work at our peak.
Yeah. Because the opposite of that too is if we don't do something to help promote autophagy, right? That's where you can have abnormal growth of cells, which is what is cancer. Or you can have other disease processes that develop. It could be chronic inflammation, it could be weight gain, it could be all these other symptoms that your body is trying to tell you in a way that I kind of need a little bit of a cleanup here. And it's probably innate as to how we developed as human beings, right? We didn't have the amount of food available to us like we do now. So this was probably something, this autophagy was really about how our bodies functioned, but our modern lifestyle now and how we live, it doesn't really allow for us to do that. So we have to put in strategies that allow us to do it, like a 5-day fasting mimicking diet sort of thing.
Exactly. You hit the nail on the head, and you brought up one of my favorite points that I think a lot of people can really relate to, which is that concept that our bodies evolved under periods of time. For the vast majority of our evolution as human beings, we did not have food at the ready all of the time. And so our
Right.
body had to learn to thrive and succeed during periods of fasting. And so it now has all of these incredible mechanisms so that if we go for periods of time without food, it switches gears and it says, okay, let's take advantage of this time to do other things that we might not be able to do when food's always around. And so, yes, we today need to really be mindful about taking advantage of that physiological advantage that we have.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like all these biohacks that we've created in modern world in order to just go back to how it naturally was, right?
Exactly. It's so funny how that works, but it's so awesome that
It
we've
is.
really tapped into it and that we understand it and that now we're able to really understand why those things were happening and how to maximize it. So that's what I'm all about, is all the different kinds of fasting, how to maximize it and how to find the right one for you.
Yeah. So obviously we're here to talk about fasting mimicking diet and get into more detail about that. But I'm curious just to know your thoughts on, like intermittent fasting and other types of fasts. Like what is your stance on that?
Yeah. So great question. There are so many different kinds of fasts. And let's just, for the sake of this question, focus only on water only fasting,
Okay.
because there's also dry fasting on one end of the spectrum and fasting mimicking on the other. But most people, when they think about fasting, they think about water only fasting. And when we look at intermittent fasting, this is the way that I typically define intermittent fasting, and a lot of researchers are now defining intermittent fasting, are fasts that are under 48 hours. So that could be a 1-day fast. That could even be up to 2-day fast, right? But most people, when they think about intermittent fasting, they're thinking 16 hours, 18 hours. And the reason why we differentiate intermittent fasting of 2 days or less from what we call prolonged fasting, which is 2 days or more, is because at that 2-day mark, the 48-hour mark, actually, that's where autophagy really kicks on. And so while, yes, I will not deny that there are benefits to intermittent fasting, these shorter fasts, because there's actually lots. There's this additional kind of level up benefit that you get when you hit day 3 of a fast, where autophagy is kicking in and your cells are getting that cleanup. So when we talk about autophagy and the importance and the value of autophagy, we also really need to talk about the importance of getting in a few of these longer fasts a year.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense. And so basically a fasting mimicking diet is one that while you might be fasting for 5 days, it gives you the ability to fast with having some type of caloric intake.
Mhm.
And we can talk about that in more detail, but where you're not just drinking water for 5 days straight.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And honestly, quite a bit of food. So I think a lot of people, when they think about fasting mimicking and this concept of fasting with food, they're like, oh, you're just going to tell me to have like bone broth
Right.
and that's it. And
Yeah, yeah,
lemon juice or
yeah,
something. And like, no, 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 no. I really mean food. So, just to give a couple of examples of what's in a fasting mimicking diet is you're getting a breakfast bar with almonds and nuts and macadamia nuts, and it's quite hearty. You're getting soups with vegetables. You're getting even like a chocolate crisp at the end of the day. So you are getting true food throughout the day: breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks, teas, supplements, all the good stuff. So that is, I think, one important caveat is that it's true food that you're having throughout the day. Now, the other thing that I appreciate that you mentioned is that the difference between water only fasting and fasting mimicking is, yes, you get food, but why? So obviously easier. I think we can all feel a little bit better about fasting for 5 days when we know that we're going to get to eat during it. But on
yeah,
top of that is safety. And maybe when like breaking down safety even more, because sure, like having low blood pressure and low blood sugar are concerns when we go water only. But another one that is so important, and I touched on it briefly before, but is the muscle protection, the ability for
yeah,
us not to tap into our muscle stores when we go on these fasts. And unfortunately, with water fasts, we run a higher risk. Now,
yeah,
when we go through a fasting mimicking diet, there's a couple of things that are happening that allow our muscles to stay safe. It's not even just the nutrients that you're getting and the calories that you're getting, because yes, that absolutely plays a part in it, but it's also this additional benefit that comes from being in a fasted state, which is that one of your hormones, growth hormone, which is very protective to muscle, goes up. And so all of a sudden you have this beautiful marriage of energy, calories coming from the fasting mimicking diet, and growth hormone, which is coming from being in a fasted state, that are just super protective to your muscle.
yeah. That's an amazing benefit because especially for, women in perimenopause and postmenopausal, because muscle loss, it is so unbelievably rapid
Mhm.
in this stage of life, which is why we hear about, now it's like you cannot even try to eat enough protein in your
Yeah.
diet, right? To try to like keep keep building muscle or muscle sparing. And it's also so important, for us to be here to be lifting weights and make sure that
Mhm.
we're building muscle. But then if we're doing something that then, is reversing all of that effort, we eat protein daily, we're lifting heavier weights, we're trying to really maintain as much muscle mass or build as much muscle mass as possible. And then we're doing something to counteract that. It's like really very counterintuitive. So I think that is a really wonderful point, especially because there are so many diets and so many weight loss programs in general, like, even with, all these GLP-1s and stuff, like where there's a risk of losing so much muscle
Yes.
that is so important for us in the long run.
Yeah, absolutely. And let me just put this in perspective. Even if you have, a really good diet, what we typically see is that from age 30 and on, we see about 3 to 5% muscle loss per decade in women. Now, if you hit the age of 50, all of a sudden this ramps up even more to 8 to 10% muscle loss.
Oh,
So, yeah, so it
that's
just
not
keeps
fair.
going up. It's not, and that's why and you mentioned it, we keep
Yeah.
hearing like, oh, eat your protein, eat your protein, eat your protein. But thankfully, you also mentioned do your weight bearing exercises, do your
Yeah.
weight bearing exercises, because you can't do one or the other. You really do have to do both.
Yeah.
Now, let me just throw another wrench in this whole saga. But on top of that, high amounts of protein, especially animal protein, also increase aging. So then it's like, what the heck? If protein increases aging, but I have to have protein to support my muscle, what am I to do? Well,
Yeah.
this is where, again, I love prolonged fasts, because really high amounts of protein, what ends up happening is that it increases all of this growth in our body. And that is great for building muscle, right? Because we want to grow muscle, but also excessively growing everything else in our body is essentially just getting us closer to age, right?
Yeah.
And so it's really important to find this happy balance between promoting this growth and promoting repair. And by giving our body these moments to repair, we're able to kind of pull back on, hey, excess growth. Let's rein that in for just 5 days. Let's get this in check a little bit. Let's do some cleanup. And then we can go back to a healthy amount of protein. The other thing that I will note is, again, I mentioned it's especially prominent with animal-based protein. And so trying to find ways to add plant-based protein, if you want to have both, go for it, but make sure to find place for plant-based protein because it is going to be a little bit more gentle in that aging and for that health as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. I think it's great advice from a whole nutritional standpoint of just mixing up what you eat, right? Trying to find variety in your diet. For those people that like stick to the same things every day, it's like you're not really meeting the nutritional needs of your body. So rotating, finding variety, I always think is sort of the best way to go.
Absolutely. And if you're struggling to find ways to incorporate protein into your diet, I would not be afraid to consider things like protein powders
Yeah.
to add those in. And if you have, your morning smoothie, just throw in a scoop. I've also even honestly, this sounds weird, but I've thrown in like a half a block of tofu, and it tastes great because it just takes on the flavor of your smoothie. Actually, L-NUTRA has come out with something called the L protein available from Prolon, and it is a plant-based protein that is also specifically designed with an amino acid profile that doesn't spike IGF-1 as much as all the other protein powders out there. So it literally has taken in consideration that balance of let's get protein and let's not excessively spike aging pathways, and has developed the whole formulation around that. So if that's something that you're looking to get more of in your diet, I would definitely urge you to take a peek into that, and certainly plant-based protein for that reason as well. I don't know if it's worth going down this rabbit hole, but a new article just came out from CNN. I don't know if you saw it on plant-based proteins and protein powders in general.
Yeah, no, I haven't.
So it was actually negative, and I always like to for
Oh,
people.
I think I may have seen it now that you say
Yes,
it's negative.
yes. Like Dr. Hyman brought it up. It is,
Yes, yes.
and it was talking about that plant-based proteins, especially, but protein powders overall, all protein powders, but especially plant-based proteins, had a higher concentration of heavy metals. And yes,
Totally have
that's
seen this.
something.
Yeah.
Yes, yes, and this is something we should be mindful of. And
Right.
so it's also really important that, and I mean, the general kind of consensus at the end of this was like, okay, what do we do?
Right.
And
Yeah.
like we know we want this protein, and we protein powders make it easier, and like let's use that, but we
Yes.
also want to be mindful of these heavy metals. And so there's a couple things that I think is worth noting here too. Is one of the things was of like choosing non-chocolate
I was
options.
going to say, I read the article and I was so pissed because I was like, oh my God, I love all the chocolate ones. Every
I know.
protein powder I get, it has like cacao and chocolate. And I was like, of course, I'm eating the
Yes.
worst.
But but here's the thing, there's still a solution for you here. Work with brands and companies that are transparent and
Yeah.
that show on their label what the heck is going on. And
Yeah.
California, I mean, I'm from Los Angeles, so I'm especially proud of this one, but California has pretty strict rules and
Right.
regulations around what is allowable. And so if your brand is living within that regulation and is able to label themselves as non-Prop 65 or being within Prop 65 regulations,
Yeah.
amazing, you're great. And that is something that L-NUTRA does as well, as we're super transparent about all of our labeling. Everything is there. And we do have a chocolate protein, and if for whatever reason, because it's based off of what's in the ground, right? So you can't always fully
Exactly.
control it. But if in the very seldom cases where that does happen, we always label it and are super, super transparent. So those are the brands that are taking that into consideration, that are doing everything they can to make sure that you know what you're putting in your body. Those are the brands you should be working with.
Yeah. No, I think that's a really, really valid point. I'm glad you brought that up about the protein powders too, because
Yeah.
I did see that. And I thought to myself, like, it's such a bummer because you're trying to supplement because you can't always have animal protein, or you're not always eating a bean salad or tofu. And so sometimes on the go, you just want to throw a scoop of protein powder in. And I was like sort of upset, like I said, especially about the chocolate. But I think you bring up a very valid and great point. You have to really know the source of all of your food that you're eating and everything you're putting in your mouth, and try to make sure that you're getting it from trusted sources, as well as, again, mixing it up. Like, maybe the protein shake isn't what you have 3 meals a day, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Mixing it
Exactly.
up.
Exactly. Absolutely. And maybe even not daily, right?
Right.
Like
Exactly.
switch it up,
Yeah,
have variety. And obviously when you can use whole plant-based foods, pick those.
absolutely. Okay, so tell us, most women that are going through, in changes of midlife are experiencing hormonal changes, and we hear about this all the time. How does a fasting mimicking diet help support all of those hormonal changes?
It's a great question. So we haven't done that research specifically yet. So I like to just be super transparent about the
Yeah.
fact that the change in hormonal profile with fasting mimicking hasn't been studied yet. But that
Okay.
being said, what is important to note is that when our hormones are changing during this period of time, all these other things are happening. So, including muscle loss, bone loss, even. And possibly even most concerning is the change in our blood sugar, too, right? And so, what we have been able to show consistently with the fasting mimicking is kind of all of the changes that happen on the other side of these hormonal changes, and that all
Yeah.
of those can be impacted positively. And so, maybe worth spending a little bit of time on this blood sugar management piece, right? So
Yeah.
estrogen, which is what is dropping when we are entering into perimenopause, or at least fluctuating pretty significantly during this time, is really important also for other things more than just ovulation and fertility. It's for so much else. It's truly kind of a control system hormone in our body. And so, one of the things that it also is supporting in is our metabolism and our
Yeah.
ability to manage our blood sugar in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And when it drops, unfortunately, we also become at a higher risk for type 2 diabetes, pre-diabetes, insulin resistance, all these kind of issues with our metabolic health and our blood sugar regulation. When we do a fasting mimicking diet, this has been shown time and time and time again. It supports healthy blood sugar management. It helps regulate that. And when we do that, it also has all these incredible other downstream effects that are good for our health and for our longevity. And so that's, again, just one example of what's happening when we work at this downstream effect. Essentially, what we're doing is we're not necessarily what we may see, sure, is regulation of the hormonal profile and not so much drastic fluctuations because of that biological age support, right? That I was
Yeah.
mentioning, right? That might happen. But even if, your hormones still continue to shift, what it's also doing is it's making all of the symptoms less because it's
Yeah.
working from all of these different angles, right? So whether it be, the changing in your blood sugar or the loss of muscle, or your skin changing and drying, all of those things are being tackled because of that cellular impact.
Yeah. And it really is amazing how everything is so interconnected. And when you start talking about making an impact and changes at the cellular level,
Yeah.
we're really talking about major changes in every organ system and every part
Yeah.
of our body. Okay. So we've talked, okay. So you mentioned Prolon and Nutra a little bit. So tell us what Prolon is.
Yes. So Prolon they are the makers of the 5-day fasting mimicking diet. It is, so just to clarify why we bring up L-NUTRA and Prolon is because L-NUTRA is our parent division. They're
Okay.
makers of Prolon, which is the consumer division, where for generally healthy people just looking to lose a little bit of weight, looking to optimize, looking to do their biological age, this is where you're going to find your fasting mimicking diet. But L-NUTRA has also created a new division called L-NUTRA Health. And this is our medical division. And so this is for people that have type 2 diabetes, that maybe have high blood pressure, high cholesterol, any metabolic issue that you're looking to tackle. And here, not only are you going to get the fasting mimicking diet, but you're also going to get dietitian support. You're going to get medical oversight. You're going to get labs. You're going to get all the extra bells and whistles to really make it a success, especially for people who do have type 2 diabetes or who have special concerns that we want to be careful with, right?
Yeah.
So just a quick note on kind of the L-NUTRA Health Prolon connection. But let's
Yeah.
spend some time on Prolon because I'm assuming that a lot of people on the podcast listening to the podcast are going to be generally healthy, maybe just looking to tweak a couple things. And that's what Prolon's all about. So fasting mimicking is the 5-day kit. It
Okay.
has everything you need: breakfast, lunch, dinner, and snacks. I mentioned you get like a nut-based bar, you get soups for lunch and dinner. Some of the snacks that somebody could expect are things like kale crackers. And these aren't just like the flimsy, just pieces of kale that are dehydrated. This is like kale mixed with nuts and seeds. And it feels like a pretty hefty cracker. And also it tastes great. It has like almost this cheesy flavor, even though everything in it is fully plant-based.
Okay.
You also get supplements. And really the way that we like to think about it is that you can really just stick to the box. That's the
Okay.
concept that we want to make,
Yeah.
that we want to keep it as easy and as straightforward as possible. You'll see, for example, here, this is kind of that meal card that somebody would get that tells them exactly what to do. But even beyond that, within your bigger box of everything that you need for the 5 days, there's individual boxes for every day. So it already arrives to you broken down into each day so that you don't even have to worry about that. You just dump it out. I usually dump it out on my counter. I just kind of break it up for my day depending on how I want to enjoy it
Yeah.
and just go off to the races. Don't have to think about anything. Just makes it really easy.
I mean, that sounds really easy. And, I think it's amazing to think that you can, it's sort of set for you. The meals are set. And, in 5 days that you can feel that much better and you don't have to completely starve yourself. I mean,
Exactly.
what a huge benefit.
I mean, truly, that is the biggest benefit because if you're not going to do something, like I could talk all day about the incredible benefits of XYZ solution. And if you're not going to do it, then who the heck cares, right?
Right. Exactly. So true.
And so this makes it so that we can get these benefits and we can do it and feel good about it too, and not suffer through it. Now, I'll be 100% honest. The fasting mimicking diet is still hard, right?
Yeah.
It's still got lower calories.
Yeah.
For example, day one is about 1,100 calories. So for most people, that day one isn't too bad, but then it drops down to about 750 for the remaining days. So it's still hard, but
Yeah.
people are always surprised. They're like, man, that was way easier than I expected. I breezed right through that.
Yeah.
And maybe what's most important is that you get that deep fat burning stage on day 2. You get that autophagy on day 3. But on day 4, day 5, and definitely day 6, people always tell me, man, I feel like Superman, or like
Yeah.
my senses are on high alert. And it's from this really cool feeling that happens when our body, one, is running on ketones, or it's essentially the byproduct of burning fat for fuel. And what happens when your cells are cleaning themselves out? You get something called keto euphoria, just this like complete clarity. And so you really know that it's working. And yeah, that
Oh my
it's
God, that's amazing. I'm doing it.
yes,
I'm
yes,
doing it.
exactly. And I would just urge everybody, try it one time. Like,
Yeah.
what's the worst that could happen? 5 days of your life. It's all we're asking for here, right?
Yeah.
And we'll just be, you'll see.
Yeah.
Just wait and see.
Just wait and see. You got to try it, right? Okay. So we know like 5 days, once a month for 3 months. Do you have suggestions for like what are some strategies that we should be doing in between the fast to kind of maintain to, live our healthiest lifestyle? Like, do you have some tips for us that,
Oh my
what do we
gosh.
do in between?
Yeah, absolutely. So much. I mean, we already talked about the importance of in midlife, the importance of protein.
Yeah.
But I want to just like quickly make a note about that. If I didn't do a good enough job of explaining it before, is that it's the importance of having protein, but also having weight bearing exercise. They must be done together, but also be mindful of how much protein you are having and not going above and beyond either,
Yeah.
because too much of a good thing can also be a bad thing. And I think in today's world, and the reason why I think so many people are so adamantly like, go get your protein, is because on average, most women are not getting enough. But
Right.
that doesn't mean that you, as a woman who is getting enough, should get more as well. Like, there
Right.
is a limit here. My general rule of thumb is about 1 gram per kilogram is probably like a good limit
Yeah.
to keep in mind. Everybody's going to be different. If you're doing a lot of weight training, maybe that's going to go up. But even for many women who are not especially active, zero 0.8 grams per kilogram is also a really good number to aim for. So, and that's per kilogram. So be mindful. You're going to have to do a little bit of
Right. Little
conversion.
conversion from pounds.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's what
Okay.
ChatGPT is for. Just so.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So that's probably the big one.
Okay.
Now other things to keep in mind is, I'm kind of basic, honestly, in that whole foods and getting in even intermittent fasting if you can, but not what you think. So I'm not going to say, let's do 16, 18 hours a day, but rather try and get at least 12 hours of fasting a day. So what that will do is it'll get you into what they call a circadian rhythm, especially if you time your first meal and your last meal carefully. And
Yeah.
by carefully, like, it doesn't have to be a specific time, but generally relatively early upon waking, which people are always surprised as a proponent of intermittent fasting. People are like, oh, well, shouldn't I just skip breakfast and wait until
Right.
2 p.m. to have my first meal? Well, if that's the only way that you're going to be able to get in 12 hours of fasting, okay, fine. But ideally, if you can time it so that you have a breakfast, especially because for us women, our cortisol when we wake up increases pretty drastically. And by having food, it helps it kind of chill out a little bit. And
Yeah.
that's just good for our whole body, because we don't want to constantly leave our body in a period of stress. And so by consuming food in the morning, we're able to kind of chill that out a little bit. And then just discontinuing eating earlier on in the evening.
Yeah.
And then another reason why we would want to discontinue earlier on in the evening is that our body actually, interestingly, again, because of essentially this clock, this watch that our cells have, they just change the way that they work throughout the day. And at the end of the day, they don't work with sugar as well as they did earlier on in the day. So if you're eating later on in the day, it doesn't really manage that super well. And it'll be easier to just throw that into fat stores instead of actually using it, burning it, and taking advantage of that. So I'm talking a lot of science, but really what I'm just saying is try and get at least 12 hours of fasting a day. If you need to lose weight, boost it to about 14, possibly 16, but I like 14 because it's not so stressful on the body. And as soon as you've reached your weight loss goal, go back down to 12. You don't need to stay at 14. That's not like your baseline. It just means go back to 12 now that you've gotten to your healthy level. And try and shift your intermittent fasts to eat breakfast earlier on in the day within at least an hour or two of waking up, and then try not to eat within about 3 hours of bed.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's great advice. The older that I have gotten, I feel like eating, I eat earlier and earlier because eating closer to bedtime, I just don't feel as good. I feel so much better if I eat my meals a little bit earlier, have that time for my body to sort of, I guess, digest and process and rest before bed, which, is very, very different than the lifestyle of the younger set.
Yeah, yeah, of course. Well, I mean, things change,
Yes,
and
things change. That's right. That's right.
but like maybe for the better too in some ways too, right? Because we become more, I think, aware and more willing to focus on ourselves, which I
Yeah.
think is something that especially as women, like there's kind of this belief that we have to be always working to for everybody else in our lives, whether it
Yeah.
be our partner, our children, etc. And later on in life, I think it's a really good time to really check in and be like, what about me? What
Yeah.
am I doing for me and what can I do for me right now and what feels good in my
Yeah.
body right now? And really giving your body time to process that. And that's another reason I sound like almost broken record, but another reason why I like
Mm.
prolonged fasting is because what we've consistently seen, we've surveyed thousands of people, is that people get a better relationship with food after completing 5 days. Because over that 5 day period, you've really checked in a lot with like your cravings and your behaviors around food and all of these things. And so
Yeah.
typically people have a better relationship with food. They have less sugar cravings. They're more motivated to do other lifestyle changes. It's pretty cool. All of these more like psychological changes that are happening when you check in for a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense because when you sort of take time to pause, you're giving yourself the opportunity to really intuitively, just listen to what your body's needs are and pay attention to them. And sort of in our daily life, we're not really doing that. We're eating on the go. We're grabbing this. We're making our protein shakes, grabbing the kids, getting them to school, doing this, doing
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really interesting way and another huge benefit of doing the fast. So, Renee, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I have absolutely loved this conversation. I know I have learned so much and I am really excited. I'm totally trying the 5 day fast because I mean, it just sounds like like to your point earlier, why not? Why wouldn't you try
Right.
it? I want to be on the ketone high.
Yes, the
I'm
keto
in.
euphoria for all.
Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much. And we will link all of the links to Prolon and L-NUTRA and where they can find you. Do you have an Instagram?
I
Tell us.
most certainly do. You can
Great.
find me on Fitton Nutrition. That's Fitton Nutrition on Instagram and ask me all the questions. We just scratched the surface, guys.
Awesome.
There is so much more to know here. Did I mention that there's over 40 clinical trials and,
Oh
30
my
years of
gosh.
research? Like there
Awesome.
is so much here. So
I
reach
love
out.
it. I love it. Well, thank you. We'll absolutely link all of that in the show notes for all of my listeners to be able to find you and find Prolon. And thank you so much for being here. You are
Thank you.
amazing.
You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for having me.
You got it. All right, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in again this week and listening to another episode of the Suburban Warrior podcast. We'll be back next week with another awesome Suburban Warrior. In the meantime, be sure to check us out on Instagram. I'm at Suburban Warrior on Instagram and TikTok. And be sure to leave us a rating and review on wherever you're listening to this podcast. Thanks so much. We'll talk to you next week.